Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Great Shot Kid, the podcast on the Nerd Party Network that examines the work of Star Wars creators. I'm one of your hosts, John.
And I'm Mike.
And this week we are going to be coming at you with a review, a revisiting of the 1989 comedy classic starring Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher, The Burbs.
Yeah.
Directed by Joe Dante. He who gave us Gremlins, as a matter of fact, earlier in the 80s. And it was released by Imagine Entertainment and was a very, it was a very high-profile comedy at the time. I remember seeing it in the movie theater. I remember that the marketing campaign leading up to it. It was of the time, for those who are in the audience who might be a little bit younger, when Tom Hanks was known exclusively for comedy. Tom Hanks had not yet made the gear shift into dramatic films. And so with that, looming in his future, unknown to all of us, possibly even to him, we had the Burbs unleashed upon us. And Mike, would you care to give a synopsis of the 1989 comedy classic, The Burbs?
Sure. Tom Hanks is a working class guy living in the suburbs, and he is taking a much-needed vacation. His life is very stressful, and instead of going away to his summer home or whatever for the weekend, he decides that he just wants to stay at home. And his wife, played by Carrie Fisher, is not very supportive of this because she feels like the suburbs themselves are rather stressful, because there's a lot of crazy neighbors and whatnot, like Bruce Dern and Corey Feldman.
Yes, it's important not to mix up your Corys.
No, yes, I always get confused. And the guy who shut down the grid at Nakatomi Plaza on Christmas Eve, 1988.
Which plays into this in a strange way later.
It does, yeah. He was much better at it in Die Hard, though, a year prior.
True. Very true.
But that group of neighbors, that group of friends, are rather suspicious of some new neighbors that have moved on the block, and
the Klepniks, right?
Yeah,
is that it?
I forget exactly.
Klepnik. It was. It sounds like that. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And they decide to take it upon themselves to investigate these new neighbors and see what shenanigans they may be up to. And hijinks ensue.
Hijinks do ensue because the very beginning of the movie is Tom Hanks being awoken in the night by strange lights and sounds coming out of the basement of where these new neighbors have moved in. So the point of attack for the script is they have already moved in, but nobody knows them. And it's the one house on the block and there's a house on every block like this, where the lawn isn't well kept and the trees may be a little bit dead, and they didn't paint the porch or anything like that. And, so it's sort of the house that, in terms of assisting property value, isn't the bright shining star.
Yeah.
But he wakes up and he goes down and he's resistant to the idea. Now, before we go deeper into it, this is in fact, if I recall correctly, a reteaming of Hanks and Fisher, because they did work on The Man with One Red Shoe before this.
Huh.
And so, this is sort of like a recapturing the magic. I don't know. The Man with One Red Shoe was not an incredibly memorable movie. There's maybe one scene that I remember up to this day where they wired his apartment wrong, and so there's an ambulance driving down the street where the surveillance equipment is, and the ambulance is driving down the street, and you hear a toilet flushing coming out of the ambulance. It's very funny, I guess.
All right. Well, that's...
But anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway. So the Burbs, there's his friend, best neighbor, I don't know, who, like you said, he was responsible for shutting down the grid at Nakatomi Plaza, but he's trying to shoot wildlife that is annoying him. He almost shoots Tom Hanks in the beginning of the movie, kills him. Yeah, okay. This movie deals with all of these things about the perception of life in the suburbs, trusting new and different people, tolerance, if you will. The zany teenage kid, pre-internet, of course, who's blasting hard rock music on his stereo while he's painting his porch. The older veteran who has married the hot young wife, who is the object of lust of all of the younger men on the block. So it's trying to deal with all of these things. I mean, I saw this in the movie theater, and I remember seeing it with my brother and thinking, like maybe a couple of chuckles. This time it got a couple of smiles. I was not overly fond of it this time. I found it actually at points to be mean-spirited and confused about its direction, whether it wanted to be a parody, a commentary, a horror movie, or just a straight comedy. Like, I feel like I couldn't make up its mind.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to it?
Yeah, this was my first time seeing it. I do remember when it came out. I was just a kid at the time, but I remember it being kind of a big deal, and I didn't realize that it was directed by Joe Dante, and that's kind of that kind of piqued my interest in a lot of ways. And seeing it, I guess I kind of admire it for what it is. But I admire it more than I like it, I think.
Okay.
There were certainly things in there which amused me, and I think I'm a bigger fan of the concept than I am of the movie itself. The idea of sort of, making a comedy, which kind of is a satire of suburban life, and hits on all of those cliches and everything. There's definitely something to that, and I think that as far as like the story arc is concerned and everything, it works pretty well. There are some moments which are definitely funny, and there are some good performances and that sort of thing. I think the style is kind of cool. It's kind of edgy and visually striking for your typical comedy, that kind of thing. But on the whole, it did not blow me away. I do not have this overwhelming desire to go back and revisit the Burbs anytime soon, that sort of thing.
Well, there were two things that jumped out at me this time. One was there's a scene, we'll call it an act break, I guess, where they finally decide to go over, and it's nighttime, and their curiosity is really piqued by what's going on at the house. And Corey Feldman is there with his girlfriend, and it was so obvious to me that this was an insert that they shot later because they wanted to either accelerate the plot or explain what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
Because they interact with nobody else. It actually looks lit a little bit differently, and the whole point of him being there is he serves as this narrator to explain all of this stuff that has happened since the last scene that they didn't bother to show you. Yeah. And he explains everybody's relationship and their perception of the new neighbors and why they're like, he just basically states all of their motivations for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And also so he can set up the later line, man, I love this block. Because there's nothing about it up to this point for anybody to love this block, because nothing interesting has happened up to that point. That there's nothing for somebody to be like, oh, this is the greatest place to live. This is so crazy. Nothing really. The neighbor trying to shoot the pest in the backyard. Okay. But there's nothing that's really, I don't know, where I would say, oh, a kid would think this was electric or anything. But then at the end, it does something that drives me nuts with these sorts of movies, where the whole moral of the story is don't judge those who are different than you. Be accepting. Understand that your way of life is not the only one. And even if you don't agree with it, you got to get along with it because they're there on your block and we're all in this together, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Good moral to give, that I think everybody can agree with. But then, spoilers, they wind up being the bad guys after all. And it reminds me of, they made fun of this on South Park with their 24 spoof, where Cartman's racism winds up helping them actually find a terrorist.
Yeah.
And they're like, but racism is bad. And Cartman says, yeah, but my racism got the bad guy after all. So it's okay. And it's like, that seems to be what happens with this movie, where it's like, trust and believe your neighbors because they're people too. Oh, but by the way, they're totally what you thought they were.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I definitely had the same thought, but I don't know. Like, it's a weird thing where you go into a movie like this, you're expecting some sort of weird supernatural element or something, just because of the way everything is presented. And, if they left it with no explanation, that wouldn't have been at all satisfying. What they should have done was come up with an explanation for things like why they're digging, graves or whatever it is in the backyard or whatever. And they never really did that. I kind of thought they were going to do that at one point, but it never actually happened. And, that was kind of disappointing. But, it is one of those things where I think there's so much effort, which is like put to that sort of thing, that you almost have to have the protagonists win, in a sense, quote unquote win.
Right.
And it's hard to do that with that message, because obviously it sort of goes against it,
Sure.
And I don't know. Maybe there would have been a way for them to sort of like hit the point home, even though these guys ended up being, the bad guys, like after that reveal that they kind of missed. Like maybe there was a beat there that they could have hit that they missed. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
Well, I almost wonder if this was something. I mean, speculation is everything, and there are certain things you do know, you don't know, that are just, supposing. But given how we know reshoots can happen and reshapings can happen, it just happened very famously recently with Rogue One, where they sat down and they said, okay, we're going to hammer this out into a different thing than what it is right now, and make it what we want it to be. I would say that probably this movie, Joe Dante, had like a straight up just horror movie where there was no message of be tolerant of your neighbors. And it really does feel tacked on in the sense of, they didn't think that it worked, and they didn't get the comedy that they wanted. So they had him go back and insert things, or they inserted things that they thought would make it work better as a comedy, whereas he was doing a darkly comic horror movie.
I see what you're saying, but at the same time, just the way the entire character is constructed, the entire movie is constructed, like it feels like it's leading to that point. It feels like it's leading to that message, and to like go all that way and not have that at the end seems. I don't know what they would have then instead.
Maybe that was part of the problem.
It feels so integrated with the rest of the movie that I really just feel like, they were trying to like have their cake and eat it too, in a sense. You know what I mean?
Okay, fair enough.
I think that they were like, this is a good message and people will take this message away, but at the same time, we can still say that, they were right. They did stop these bad guys after all.
Well, while I'm sitting here stomping on it, is there anything that jumped out at you as particularly successful? I mean, you said earlier that you admire what they were doing more than you actually liked the movie. What is it that worked? What is it that looked like something where you looked at it, you said, okay, all things considered, this went pretty well?
I mean, I liked the satire. I liked the sort of takedown of the suburbs in a sense, but in a loving way. I mean, like, you were talking about the Corey Feldman thing earlier and how there's nothing going on that block, which would suggest that he'd be like, I love this block, and I mean, sure, we just saw a house blow up, and that could definitely impress a teenager, but sure. I think it goes beyond that. Like, I think he had that love for it before the fireworks, literally, and I think kind of what they were trying to get at was like, the suburbs are a crazy place. They definitely have their quirks. You've got all these neighbors, all these people who you're kind of like forced to live with, because I mean, it's not like they're just saying like, oh, these neighbors who are very strange and keep to themselves are, the only ones that are, sort of like a nuisance. I mean, all of his quote unquote friends are, people who he's just as annoyed by as, the people who he thinks are murdering, his neighbors. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I mean, I think that's how a lot of people feel about their suburban neighborhoods. I mean, it's sort of like a thing where you feel like you're stuck in that sort of like quote unquote perfect, little society or whatever, which is kind of outside of the real world. And I mean, that's sort of, I think, what they were trying to get at with this is like, yeah, suburbs are weird, they have their quirks, but at the same time, there's actually a lot to be said for them. I mean, at the end of the day, he does have good relationships with these people, which he wouldn't have maybe in, like a bustling city or something like that. And, I kind of appreciate all that. And I think that's kind of what they were trying to say with like the Feldman character, where he's like, I like this. I like hanging out with these guys, these weird random guys who normally I would never talk to, and stuff like that. So I mean, that seems to be something that Dante is kind of obsessed with. If you look at his other movies, whether it's the Twilight Zone, which we talked about on Stage 9, or whether it's Gremlins or Small Soldiers in particular, there's always that sort of like suburban warfare setting, and there's something about that which is very comical, and very sort of like lovingly, jabbing at this thing. And I think that this movie is kind of like that, like at its most straightforward. And while maybe something being tremendously straightforward is not necessarily a good thing, I do think that it's it can hit certain points home better than broader stories which just incorporate those sort of elements. If that makes any sense. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I actually, and I'm not just saying this just because this is, great shot, kid, and we love Star Wars creators, but I thought that Fisher was a high point. I thought that she was really good as, the straight man, the grounded character who, provided sort of a sanity check for Hanks's character. You can see her as, the true north to his character, because when she's away, you see what happens when he is left to his devices with his insane neighbors. That she's the one that steers the ship in a typical circumstance. I thought that there were specifically some funny moments, largely due to Hanks, like when they finally visit the strange neighbors, and they have what it was like sardines on crackers or something like that. And
which to me was very funny, because like in my sort of like suburban childhood or whatever, we would always go over to my dad's friend's house. My dad and this other guy, they were priests together, and they both left the priesthood and started families, and so our families were like really close, and we'd always go over to their house for pizza, and their dad would always like bring out sardines to put on his pizza, and everyone else would be like, "You are freaking insane. What are you doing? Why are you, what is that?" And he'd always be like, "You guys want some?" And we'd be like, "Hell no, we don't want some. Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, hey." That's like something from my childhood, my suburban upbringing,
Yeah, fair enough. See, I guess I live, presently with the fear that I'm the crazy neighbor.
Yeah.
Because I think that everybody else is pretty locked down and pretty happy with their suburban life, and I'm the one that I might be the little imbalanced one that encourages
No, but
stupidity.
I think Dante would probably share your perspective. I think that's why he made this movie. Because like none of the other characters seem to be like the suburbs, man. They're crazy. It's just Hanks's character who's like that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think that you're Hanks. I think we're all Hanks in this scenario, but I think Dante is definitely Hanks. You know what I mean?
We're all Hanks.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take it. Can I get a couple of Oscars too?
Sure, why not?
I think I deserve them. I definitely think that I deserve them.
Yeah.
There are just so many pieces to this that I think they're just it really does come across to me watching it that it's just assembled by, I don't know. I don't detect, like, if I look at Gremlins, I think I can see Dante at work. I can see a strong hand there. Somebody saying, this is the movie I'm going to make and this is the way it's going to go. And I look at the darkness in Gremlins, really unsettling darkness. And then I come over to the Burbs and I see a hint of that darkness, but I see it suppressed. I see it shaped. I see it hammered out. I see it cut. And that's just what comes across to me in this, is that I see a director who has more constraints placed on him and more people double checking his math.
It is kind of weird because it almost feels like, while Gremlins was obviously a huge hit, like
Yeah.
I wasn't there, right? But I feel like Gremlins was kind of a surprise hit,
I
And
definitely
then-
think Gremlins was a surprise hit.
And then-
I do. It came out of nowhere.
right. And then when it hit, people are like, "Oh yeah, Joe Dante, you're hot," make the Burbs, and then it became sort of like the almost like commercial I don't know. There's a thing that I see this with directors all the time where it's just like, wow, that's a weird thing where like there's a genre filmmaker or something like that who makes a movie and then like, he makes something else which is, sort of like prestigious. And it's like, the examples that come to mind are like Sam Raimi directing A Simple Plan or I guess Roger Vadim did a lot of prestigious movies, but he, I know him from Barbarella. You know what? So
Right.
like when I see like a Roger Vadim movie as part of the Criterion Collection or something like that, I'm like, wait a minute. Or like when my parents are saying like, I want to see that new movie Simple Plan. I'm like, by the guy who did Army of Darkness? Okay, yeah, that sort of thing. And that's kind of how I feel like the Burbs is. It's the more, it's like trying to capture that craziness and sort of bottle it up for the mainstream, and it doesn't really work as well, like you're saying.
Though, I would say, it came out in 1989, and I would say that you have an example here of Dante not fitting the mold, but in 1989, you have an offbeat genre director who has a tremendous hit with Batman.
Yeah.
So I think that the Burbs is instructive in the sense that you have the star power, you have the studio backing, you have the hot, quirky director, you have a glimpse, not literally, of course, but you have a glimpse of how Batman could have gone for Warner Brothers, of somebody not quite fitting in right and not quite hitting the mark. I mean, obviously with Batman, Burton did, but I think that you know what, I would actually say, because we're obsessed with double features and stuff like that, I would show the Burbs and Batman just as a lesson in when it goes wrong and when it goes right.
Yeah,
I think
that could be
I think that would be a neat one.
I seem to remember hearing this, although I could be wrong, but I would be shocked if Dante was not one of the names being tossed around to direct Batman, right?
That would make sense.
He must have been, right? I mean, it would be interesting to see what a Dante Batman...
For Pete's sake, they were talking about Rutger. I remember them talking about casting Rutger Hauer as Batman.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, Rutger Hauer... People don't remember, Rutger Hauer's name was tossed around for almost every project for like a 10-year span after Blade Runner.
That's so
Even for
weird.
things where it made no sense. They were like, oh, well, we were considering Rutger Hauer. Have you... Really? Have you watched Rutger Hauer's work? Like, he doesn't seem like a good fit for this. Because, Rutger Hauer, of course, most famously was Anne Rice said, "Oh, I always pictured Rutger Hauer as the vampire Lestat."
That's weird.
And
Yeah.
oh yeah, no, she always said that's what she pictured, and that's why she was so upset when Cruise was cast instead as Lestat.
Okay, well that's
Yeah,
cool. I
right?
guess I don't know. I prefer my Rutger Hauer in Batman Begins. So
Yes, I think he was. Gosh, I almost wonder if casting him in Batman Begins was a nod to that. But I remember very specifically that because people were obsessed with the casting of Keaton.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh, there's another similarity right there where you have Burton casting Keaton as Batman and you have Hanks in The Burbs. I mean, granted, they're different movies and everything, but wow, what a double feature this really would make.
Yeah.
Huh. We need to do this. We need to start a movie festival with a quirky double feature like this.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of double features, just a little Joe Dante story, which I might have told once before, but they were doing like a Joe Dante festival. I don't know what it was at the Music Box here in Chicago at one point, and they were showing was it like Matinee and Gremlins 2 or something like that. And my friend went to this, and he was sitting like pretty close to the front, and it was a pretty empty theater. And like 15, 20 minutes into the movie, some guy into Gremlins, I think, Gremlins 2, some guy comes in, sits right in front of him, and then just like obnoxiously laughing throughout the entire movie. And my friend is like, God, there's always that one guy, there's always that one guy. So the movie ends, and they're like, okay, and now we're going to do a Q&A. Let's introduce Joe Dante. And the guy stands up and gets up on stage. It was Joe Dante who came in 15 minutes late to his own movie and just could not stop laughing at it.
Well, at least you know that when he put it together that he loved it.
Yeah.
And but of course, every time I hear mention of Gremlins 2, I was one of the 50 people who saw that movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I still haven't seen it myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you the part where the film breaks and Hulk Hogan is in the audience yelling at the Gremlins in the projector booth.
Yeah.
I'm sure it works really well on home video.
No, well,
I'm sure that's translated. What? They changed it?
Well, I mean, I think on the DVD and everything, and now it's as it was in the theater. But when it first came out on VHS, they had an alternate version which made it look like your VCR was breaking.
See, the thing is, I will say that even though I was a young lad when Gremlins 2 came out, I had enough self-respect never to watch it again. Until many years later when I was an adult, then I said, whatever, it's on TV. Oh, wow, this is really as bad as I remember.
I'm sure the VHS thing opening it's got to be on YouTube now, right? It's got to be.
It's got to be I'm sure that when the Blu-ray comes out, the Blu-ray comes out. See, Gremlins 2 is going to be one of those movies that comes out on Blu-ray where I'm like, that one is going to get we're going to get, you know what? If we got 4K of Phantasm thanks to Abrams, I'm sure there's a 4K of Gremlins 2 on the way. I'm sure of it.
You know what Dante movies should have a 4K version coming out?
What's that?
Small Soldiers.
I have actually never seen it.
That's, to me, that was I think the first one that I saw. And everyone, at the time was like, it's like Gremlins 3, and I'm like, I don't know what that means because I haven't seen Gremlins 1 and 2. But I can tell you, Small Soldiers is great. Let me just tell you, this is how much, I mean, I don't know if you know the basic premise, but there's David Cross, I think it is like a toy manufacturer who creates these toys, and basically they become sentient, right? And he's trying to do this thing, but they change his vision, and basically they have like soldiers and monsters, right? And the two of them gain sentience or whatever, and they're like robotic kind of things. And this kid gets them somehow, all of them, the only ones. And basically these two sides decide to go to war with each other. Okay. So they're basically fighting a battle, but this kid's suburban house is the battleground,
Okay.
And hijinks ensue, right? But here's the thing. I mean, that premise is solid enough on its own, right? There's the soldiers and the monsters, and the monsters are like the good guys. They're gentle, peaceful monsters,
Yeah.
Okay. So the voices of the soldiers, and they did not advertise this at all. They didn't do any, they just did it, Voices of the soldiers are the Dirty Dozen. And the
What?
voice, yes.
No.
And
For
the voice,
real?
yes.
Okay,
And-
see, I'm sold. I got to see this now.
okay, but then the voices of the monsters,
Yeah?
Spinal Tap.
No.
Yes.
No, for real?
Yes.
Okay. See, the thing is, in one fell swoop, you sold it to me, and the whole time you were describing that, the only thought in my head was, this is yet another instance of us watching a movie where we're talking about anything but the movie. Because we, look, it's for, the Burbs is for free on Amazon Prime as we record this. Mm-hmm. I encourage you to watch it for free. Anybody listening to the sound of our voices, watch it for free, because you will not want to pay for it. Because if you pay for it, you will be angry. You will be disappointed. Or maybe not. And if you're not, we go ahead and invite you to go on over to thenerdparty.com/contact, look up Great Shot Kid. Go ahead and tell us that we're wrong here, that The Burbs is in fact a classic of American cinema comedy. And, we're way off base here. We're not, but, go ahead and tell us that. That's fine. You can also find us over on Facebook at facebook.com/thenerdparty. You can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. You can find us as The Nerd Party over on Instagram. And you can go ahead and you can find us on iTunes, actually, where we just recently got a couple of new reviews, both 5 stars, which we very much appreciate. And Mike, those reviews, one of them comes from MC Cash 33, McCash 33.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that one says that's 1 in a million. And that says, Mike and John bring an excellent and extremely knowledgeable look at the creations of the people behind the magic of Star Wars. The show is at its best when diving into the minutiae of their chosen subjects, something they do with a perspective and knowledge base that makes them endlessly entertaining, especially when Mike is expressing subdued rage at films being shown in the improper aspect ratio. That's a factual thing. Or frame rate.
It's not subdued, though.
That's true. Well, okay. Or he's gushing about some obscure film being, quote, the best thing ever, end quote. Now, the thing is, I will say that it's subdued in the sense that you are like Spock, in that you can calmly break down everything that's wrong with something without setting fire to it the way Kirk would. So, that's what I think they mean by subdued.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So, do you want to read the other? We've got another 5-star review.
Yeah, it's from MSU Go State. Would that be Mississippi State?
No, MSU is going to be Michigan State University. As a
Spartans.
Maryland
Okay.
boy who's now in the Big Ten, that's what MSU is.
Okay, gotcha. This show is crazy good with how in-depth they get for their analysis. It's so interesting to hear their perspectives, especially when they disagree. It's like a modern-day Siskel and Ebert, where you can agree with whoever is talking and then the other can change your mind. But about stuff that has to do with Star Wars, what Star Wars people did. Great concept. Well, thank you, MSU Go State. Go Spartans.
Hey, there you go. Go Spartans.
Yeah.
You knew the mascot. That's excellent.
Yeah, I'm in the Big Ten. I'm in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
It's a Big Ten city.
Yeah, that's I can say at the very least, as somebody who was in the ACC who got switched into the Big Ten, I enjoy Tom Izzo beating me now instead of Coach K. So,
Yeah, I have no idea who Tom Izzo is, but that's okay.
The coach over at he's the Spartans basketball coach.
Oh, well, there you go then.
Great guy, class act, and legendary coach. Actually, seriously, he's a lot of respect for him. But
Cool.
And you obviously have, maybe we'll give Tom Izzo thanks for this, fan who wrote such a great review of Great Shot Kid. So if you feel inspired to go on over to Great Shot Kid and give us a review, you can just go on over and find us on iTunes and give us a review. Mike, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, And you can also find me on a new show on the talkfilmsociety.com called Soderbergh 2828, where we're talking about all 28 Steven Soderbergh films leading up to the release of Logan Lucky. And you can find me on commentarytrackstars.com, where this week we just released an episode celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Return of the Jedi special edition, in which we go through every change made to the movie for that 1997 release and discuss whether or not it was a positive or a negative. And so check that out for sure on commentarytrackstars.com. And then you can also find me on Trek.fm doing Stage 9, which is a show very similar to this one, except that we're talking about Star Trek creators instead of Star Wars creators. And my co-host for that show is John.
Ah, he sounds like a charming fellow. Yes, Stage 9 is it's a wonderful exploration of the work of Star Trek creators. We have a lot of fun with it over there. And we invite you to, if you like this show, you will like Stage 9. That is pretty much a lock. I can guarantee you for that. Right here on the network, you can also find me co-hosting Aggressive Negotiations with Matt Rushing, which has a Star Wars focus, but we are looking at weirder aspects of the Star Wars universe. As a matter of fact, just this week, I guess it's not weird, but just this week we looked at the collective fan obsession with Star Wars toys and our own memories and tragedies having to do with collecting over the years. It's a fun episode. You can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. It's a free-form show. We don't really have a locked topic, and sometimes we drink alcohol to excess and have some fun.
Nice.
And it's silly. It's silly stuff. And you can find me as Kessel Junkie, and that, right now I'm taking a hiatus from Twitter, but I'm usually over there. But I'm taking a hiatus right now. You can also find me as Kessel Junkie on Instagram. Seriously, if you look for Kessel Junkie, that's me. And you'll be able to find me on pretty much anything. So with that, we thank you for joining us this week. And
one last thing for people who might want to see Small Soldiers. It is available on Netflix, so check it out.
Oh, excellent. And the thing is, that ties into our last show, because we watched In the Land of Women, which was John Kasdan's movie. Mike watched it for free, and your dense, bald co-host right here watched it for 99 cents, which angered him.
Well,
there you go.
What can you do?
Nothing.
You got to support starving artists like John Kasdan.
Yes. It seems that they probably didn't pay him much from the Disney coffers for the upcoming Han Solo movie, for which he will make profit points. No, not at all. He's struggling.
Yeah,
struggling.
I'm sure he did it, like on spec, and then they're like, whatever, we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll give you something. I don't know.
Yeah,
they let him eat at the food cart on set.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you for joining us this week. And join us next week when we are going to do another one of our triple features, where we are going to look at the first works of the directors of the episode sequel trilogy. So we will be looking at the first films of J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, and Colin Trevorrow. So that's going to be Mission Impossible 3, Brick, and Safety Not Guaranteed.